let's kick off with a view on the production figures that we saw coming through for the full year. Sugar production up by some 14% to 1,150 million tonnes, but it seems like it's still a case of Africa driving the increase in productions and sugar production in South Africa increasing at a somewhat slow pace. Just explain the numbers for us.
Yeah, essentially, with our sugar production, it's all a question of cane. We've been very actively involved over the last few years to put more hectares under cane in all three of those countries and to improve the cane yields. And they don't necessarily come through evenly. So this year, the highlight obviously was Mozambique. If one looks forward to our projections, in the next 2 years, you'll see a big increase in sugar production in both South Africa and Zimbabwe. We already can see that all the time because we can see what new land we put under cane. In this last year alone, we put 13,520 hectares under cane. And for those people who do not understand hectares, if you take a strip of land half a kilometer wide, that's 27 kilometers of cane that we put in just in this last year alone.
So that's a lot, and I'm sure you've used that line to explain it for people who are not familiar with the sugar industry, Peter. Just drill into some of the numbers that we've got here in terms of your milling capacity, because you say that you do have capacity to operate at 2 million tonnes, and as I said, your production coming through at 1,150 million tonnes. So what is it going to take you to get to that capacity that you still have at your mills?
We've already got a reasonable sense what will happen this year because the cane is already in the ground. So we're expecting this year alone that is now coming a further increase between 12 and 25%. And we're working on quite a pace. Our plan is over 3 years to improve this by 51% over and above what we were this year.
You talk about yields, and of course production is not just a function of the land under that has been under cane, it's also production of yield. So you highlight in the results that there's still a gap between the area under cane and the hectares milled, and that's going to be a feature for the next few years. What are the steps that are needed to address this issue?
Because essentially the one we nearly got behind us on our own estates, and that's to get your root age to the right age. The moment you sit with old roots and you've got weather, sort of unfavorable weather conditions, they get impacted more. You've got older roots, and you also find that your yields drop off quite dramatically. But we're nearly there now with our own roots. Some of the private farmers still there's a gap to fulfill down there. And then yes, generally in the farming practices, to get it right, to get the fertilizer right, to get the regular irrigation right, all aspects to get your yields up. We've made good progress, and in this year in all three countries we improved the yields.
Let's talk about the climate and climate change issues and the implications that has longer term for a company like yourself, which is very reliant on weather, and the unpredictable nature of that, I suppose, makes it a lot harder. You had the drought in KZN that impacted yields. What can you do from the company perspective to manage this and create crops that are more weather resistant? Is this an issue for you?
It is definitely an issue, and definitely a root age has got quite an impact. Obviously, people have got quite a short memory sometimes when it comes to weather, and we tend to extrapolate the last summer into the next 10 years. The long-term forecast for the KZN actually are saying that we'll get more rain, but more in an infrequent pattern. So that's what the forecast at the moment is from climate change.
There are, of course, areas of growth and potential areas where you're able to generate revenue outside of the business. In terms of ethanol production, I know that regulation is on the table with government to allow sugar producers to tap into this form of electricity. Where do you stand on that with government? Is government moving quickly enough to be able to unlock the potential that has for you?
Look, one is always a little bit impatient, and one always feels government is moving a little bit slow, but one has to put it into perspective. When you put these regulatory frameworks in place, they normally stand for the next 10 years. So you need to think through them from all sort of angles. We're very close now, and Minister Peters in the latest budget speech spoke about it, to get an electricity regime in place for the South African sugar industry. On the ethanol side, we are also moving nicely along, where our objective is to get to the place where South Africans export sugar is turned into ethanol.
In terms of cogeneration, will it be all systems go when that regulation is on board? I mean, do you have any forecast in terms of the amount of electricity you'll be able to produce from your own sugar?
It's at a stage now where I don't want to comment too much about it, but essentially government is very keen, and correctly so, that to get a bit of a bidding process going between the different sugar companies, and a lot of it will depend exactly how that process will unfold.
Of course, one of the other factors that shareholders want addressed right now is unlocking the value of the properties that you have on your balance sheet. I know that you said that the Cornubi Industrial and Sabaya Node 1 have been put up for sale. To what extent have you identified properties on your balance sheet that are up for sale in the coming year, and how much of this property that you sit on right now are you looking to sell?
Look, I think first of all, as one should recognize, when it comes to property development, one rather call it a winter rather than a summer. At the same time, one sees it a long-term process. If you just think about Durban alone, it's got between 3.5 and 4 million people that live there, and the forecast is that it will rise to 7 million, and you don't have to be a genius to work out, as the city expands, what will happen to our land around the city itself. In these processes, we're working very closely with the city on Cornubia. The first phase was to get land in place for housing, which is moving along nicely. And what was exciting during this last period is we've got a right to sell the industrial land next to the housing land, and we made our first 22 hectare sales during this period.